I have a very generous and supportive partner who lets me go do this. And like, we work it out, right? Like babe, I want to be at the gym 7 days a week. How about 4? Okay. Four is a good, reasonable thing. I want to train Saturday and Sunday. How about we train 1 day a weekend? That way the whole weekend isn't completely built around your, amateur hobby.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. It's your host Travis. Today I have a great guest in Blake Kasemei from Blake of Today on Instagram, TikTok, and everything like that. He is a Jiu-Jitsu brown belt down in Los Angeles, California. Been training for about 10 years. Is a father. He is a Jiu-Jitsu practitioner, a writer, freelance copywriter. And if you guys have never checked out his content online, it's great. He tells stories on the internet, and then once a week he does a This Week in Fatherhood, if you guys recognize that. And I wanted to talk to him because recently I have been wanting to make more content with my struggles as a parent and jiu-jitsu practitioner and how I've been overcoming those and ways to help parents more that do jiu-jitsu, because I've realized at home a lot of you guys are parents and jiu-jitsu practitioners, and I want to be able to help you in any way I can. And today's conversation, we definitely dive a lot into jiu-jitsu, Blake competing in jiu-jitsu, him as a parent, lessons learned from cycling, what it's like to compete, and just a wealth of knowledge. And hopefully you guys enjoy it. I had a blast conversation with him, a lot of laughs. He's a super funny guy. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. And if you make it all the way to the end, Blake and I joke about it a little bit. So make sure that you guys let us know if you make it all the way to the deep end. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Remember, go give us a 5-star review everywhere. Join El Bros over on Facebook. The Facebook community is almost 100 people. It's pretty good. And then make sure you guys check out elbowstight.com if you guys want merch. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much. We'll catch you later. Peace. All right. Hey, Blake, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We kind of already just small talked a little bit. It sounds like you're having a super phenomenal busy day, fatherhood at its finest. How you doing?
Good. Busy morning. Sundays, we have an 8 a.m. masters only open mat at my gym, which is pretty sick. And so I snuck out of the house this morning and got some training in, and then just immediately into the park and into the breakfast, lunch. It's like almost 100 degrees here by 10 a.m. And so we brought out the kiddie pool, and I was like blowing up the kiddie pool. And I have a 3.5-year-old who just understanding like how time works. And as I'm sitting there like pumping it up, he like doesn't understand why it's not full yet. And so by the time we finally got the kiddie pool together, he was so over it. And so he's excited when it started, and it's just like, he's like, this fucking thing still? Okay, cool. All right. Yeah. I'm gonna go play with my phone. I'll see you later.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, my toddler, he's like 2.5. He'll be 3, or he's almost 3. He'll be 3 in October, like I mentioned. And dude, he's the same way, bro. It's like he sees me pull out the air fryer and put chicken nuggets in it, and he's like, "Daddy, come on, give them to me." I'm like, "Dude, it's frozen." So I had to like give him one just to show him like they're not ready to eat. And he's like, "Daddy, cold." I was like, "Yeah, I know it's cold. I'm just gonna put it in the air fryer." Sense of time is like nothing. It's like
yeah.
So. But hey, so for people that don't know who you are at home, your Instagram, TikTok has been absolutely blowing up lately. In the short amount of time that I followed you, I think I started following you, had maybe 20, 30,000 people following you. And then all of a sudden it was like 150,000 people following you on Instagram. So for people that don't know who you are, you want to just give us a little bit of background of who you are, how you got into jiu-jitsu and everything like that?
Yeah, so I'm a freelance copywriter and creative director. I actually used to run my own agency. I've worked in-house in that profession for a long time. And about 1.5 years ago, I started telling stories with my phone on the internet. Full disclosure, I've been wanting the internet to notice me probably since there has been an internet, and as such, like I've been creating content to those ends. Some of it good, a lot of it is terrible, and the vast majority of it, thankfully, has gone unnoticed. And in the more recent future or past, some of the stuff just really started resonating with people and took off. And I've been very fortunate to have only had people's attention spans when the quality of the stuff that I've been making, I think, is to a degree that I am not too humiliated to put it out in the world. So that feels good. I'm also a podcaster. Unfortunately, in 2018, my mom passed away from a brief but brutal fight with lung cancer. And I created a podcast called Good Grief. That was a 9-episode project that wrapped at the end of 2019 that just kind of talked about my process of mourning and loss. And it's remarkable. It still gets thousands of downloads a month when people find it. So yeah, it's just an emotional sort of geography of what you experience when you lose a loved one. I think I was in my my mid 30s when it happened, and I had never really been confronted with loss and my own mortality on that scale. And I thought there may be a lot of other people out there who experienced something similar. And anyways, it's kind of like the podcast that I wish I would have had when that happened. But yeah. And then, jiu-jitsu, I'm stripes are silly. I'm a 3-stripe brown belt. I've been training for about 10 years. My athletic background is actually in cycling. So I started racing bikes in my mid 20s. I actually raced, on the Cal cycling team and the Cal triathlon team. And so I was a pretty serious cyclist for many years, and started doing jiu-jitsu because it's so much safer, honestly. And so, yeah, that's kind of my background. Oh, and yeah. So, and if you don't know, I make stories. I tell them on the internet. I've got a Substack in which I, publish a story a week. And I also have another podcast. Sorry. It's like,
You're good, bro. Go ahead.
The intro here, called Grappling with Fatherhood, that I just launched literally like last week, and it is me and another a jiu-jitsu black belt named Uday Malhotra talking about fatherhood, grappling, and the lessons learned in both and where they sometimes intersect.
Man, no, that's a great intro.
That's my resume. Did I get the job?
No, you're good, man. I could. That's pretty much wraps it up, guys. Thank you guys for listening. No, awesome. there's a lot there. So how did you initially get into jiu-jitsu 10 years ago? Was it something you were kind of always interested in, or?
So yeah, I mean, that's a good question, Travis. My story is pretty, of all the stories I tell, my jiu-jitsu story is probably the most boring. So I think, like most people, who are our age, right? Which is actually a lot of people who train jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
93, I'm watching, UFC 1, UFC 2, UFC 3 with my uncles, and they're all Taekwondo guys, right? And they've been going to Master Ree's Taekwondo in the Valley, and they've been competing in Taekwondo and all of this stuff. And then, Hoist Gracie goes in and fucking destroys people. And the next day, those dudes signed up for jiu-jitsu, right? And so I would watch the VHS tapes with my uncles and just be like, God, this jiu-jitsu shit is so cool. And then as I went on, throughout my life, like I was been a UFC fan, and jiu-jitsu at the time was the game changer, the dominant force in the sport, right? I think in my mid 20s, like it was Anderson Silva's era, like all these kind of like absolute phenoms of jiu-jitsu, So anyways, I was at work. I was working in a corporate job. I was the head of content, or I was a copywriter actually at a fitness company in San Francisco. And Groupon came across the desk for jiu-jitsu, $100 for like a month, and you get a free gi when you sign up. And I went with a bunch of friends and who I worked with, and it was the worst situation to sign up for. The gym was amazing. It's a great gym. It's called Bay Jiu-Jitsu in San Francisco. It's run by this guy, Stefan. He has a great environment, great gym. I went with like 4 dudes at the same time who really just wanted to beat the piss out of each other. And so my first month of jiu-jitsu was just miserable. I was like, God, like I didn't even have like the exposure to other students. I might get to drill with a brown belt or something, but like the idea, like I was like, guys, we could have just fucking saved $100 and been doing this in like somebody's garage, like. And so after my month was up, I was like, I'm good. Like I did a thing. It's cool. And then I had a friend who's a purple belt a couple months later who I worked with, and he kind of saw all this go down. He's like, hey man, like, I think you might actually like this. I just think you like had a bad experience. And I was like, okay, dude. And he's like, bring your gi to work. And so I brought my gi to work and I had it at my desk for like probably like 2 weeks. And I was like, and finally, like one day I just kind of like looked at it and I was like, okay, bro, like let's go today. And he took me up the hill to this school called Homolo Mello. BJJ. Homolo is a black belt under Vinny Aida, Gracie Chichuka, or sorry, Gracie Humaida. And I walked right in and Homolo said, make yourself at home. And I did just that for the next 8 years or so. And I now train under Alberto Crane because my family had to move to LA. So yeah, I train at Legacy Jiu-Jitsu here, but that's kind of like my story. Again, not super interesting, unfortunately, but that's how I got to where I am.
Gentlemen, first impressions matter. And if you're not taking care of your skin, that's going to be the first thing someone notices and instantly thinks you're way older than you are, or you don't care about your appearance. Show them you do and make a great first impression with Caldera Lab. Caldera Lab reached out to me to promote their products, and I gave it a month try before even bringing it on the podcast. And as someone that has had adult set on acne and growing up, my skin has always been a problem with me. It was something that I was a little bit hesitant about, but I am super excited that I started to work with them. Their stuff is phenomenal. I use it twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening, and my face has never felt better. In Jiu-Jitsu, we often make the joke that Jiu-Jitsu adds lots of years onto your life and makes you look way older than you really are. Well, with Caldera Lab, you can stop that and you can make yourself look your age again. Whether you're an older practitioner or a younger practitioner, Caldera Lab has something for you, and their products are great. Caldera Lab knows the skincare world is heavily female-driven and has long been the Wild West for men. That's why they're making the solution simple. The regimen includes 3 products: the Clean Slate, the Base Layer, and the Good. The Clean Slate starts and ends every day. The Base Layer is a daily moisturizer to hydrate your skin and jumpstart your day full of confidence. The Good is a multifunctional serum at night that helps your skin look tighter and smoother, as well as help it reduce visible wrinkles and fine lines. And just for our audience, 20% off with code ELBOWSTIGHT at calderalab.com and make unforgettable first impressions that lean to the charming words, "You look younger." Once again, that's 20% off at calderalab.com using code ELBOWSTIGHT, or click the link down in the description below and use code ELBOWSTIGHT for 20% off. Thank you, Caldera Lab, for sponsoring this episode. No, I think you brought up a good point in your story too. I talked to Steve Kwan, who's BJJ Mental Models, and one thing he brought up that you mentioned in yours too is a lot of people don't even get their first stripe because they haven't experienced, like you mentioned, where it's like just like they think it's not for them. They have a terrible experience, and they don't know any better that it's not like that. You know what I mean? They just happen to walk into the wrong school, or like go with some people that they probably shouldn't have if they wanted the right experience, right? But I think it's cool that you didn't let that hold you back from trying it again. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like a lot of people could have a better experience in the beginning of their journey if they don't give up on that first try and then maybe just try a different school or something like that. Or, I think that's a very important lesson learned, because a lot of people don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, right? Like the friction of going to it at all in the first place. Like once you've overcome that friction, and you have a bad experience, you're like, what? Why did I just do something that was so challenging to walk into that place to just have a terrible experience? And like, again, it's not against Stefan or Bay Jiu-Jitsu. He runs a great school. He actually has a couple of schools across the Bay Area. It was just the vibe that I came in with. But the second is like, kind of like once you've already gotten your feet wet, you realize like one thing with cycling is that like your first race is usually a total shit show. You have all these ideas in your head for how it's going to play out. And then, you experience your adrenaline and you kind of get in the mix and you realize like within 5 minutes of the race, like you're totally dropped because of how uncomfortable you are. And so you don't get good at racing until you race a lot. And it doesn't matter what kind of fitness you bring to the table. It's very similar to competing, right? Like in jiu-jitsu, like competing is its own skill in and of itself. Let alone like the jiu-jitsu that you do while you're competing, the prep and the mental work and just even like, what you eat and how you go to the bathroom the day of and all that stuff is like, that's a whole skill set that you have to learn. So your first couple tournaments are probably not going to go great, but the more you compete, the better you get at competing. So anyways, similar lessons, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I agree. I competed for my first time. I talk about it just about every episode since competing for the first time. But that's my
Fuck
biggest
yeah,
takeaway
man.
is
Get your money's worth, dude.
bro.
Get your money's worth.
People are like,
Yeah, they
Jesus,
gave you a
Travis talking about
t-shirt
fucking
and a medal,
competing.
but you could only wear those so many days a week. You know, you could tell that story every time you get on the mat.
That's right. That's right. And but that was the biggest eye opener for me, was because people were like, "Oh, it's just jujitsu. It's just jujitsu." It is not. It is a completely different animal when it comes to your jujitsu game. And ever since then, I'm like, I got to compete at least one more time, and that's how everyone keeps competing, right? As I just want to do it one more time because I feel like I didn't give myself the proper workup to the competition. Because in my head, I was like, I'm just gonna do jujitsu. I'm just gonna do jujitsu, and then I got there and I was like a freaking fish out of water, bro. Like it was,
Yeah.
like, but I'm a blue belt. I'm a 3-stripe blue belt, and I've been doing jujitsu for over 5 years, and that was the first time I competed. So, how long did you do your first competition when you started jujitsu?
Very quickly.
Really?
Embarrassingly soon. I was that white belt that was like fucking put me in there, bro. Because and like, and what you learn as you compete, more, or if you choose to compete more, is that competition actually holds you back in some ways, technically, at a lower belt level, because for me, like, I developed an A game, and so when I was competing, right, I was competing like 6-7 times a year. I was just working on my A game, because if
Mm.
I can dictate the match, if I can bring the match into my game, and then I'm talking blue, purple belt, right? Like, this isn't high level jujitsu. But if I can bring the match into my game, then I don't have to work on that other stuff. And I know that once you come into my world, like, this is gonna go a certain direction, straight up.
Yeah.
Pull the half guard, waiter sweep, pass, fucking stall. 5 points, it's me. You know what I mean? And I
Done.
like did
Got
it
it.
again and again and again. And like, like that. And that was like, and so I would do it in the gym. I would just be like, cool, like I'm competing in 2 weeks. Like, let's play the game. Let's play the game. And then and then after you'd compete, you have that like, okay, I'm going to take a week easy. And then you start ramping up for the next competition, and you don't take risks because you're like, those risks aren't going to serve me. Right. So you get really good at that one thing that you win at, and you neglect all these other parts of your game.
That is,
So
I have never heard anyone say that, tell you the truth.
yeah.
People always talk about the pros of jiu-jitsu and or competing in jiu-jitsu, and how, you develop faster, and, you get all this exposure to people, and then, like real-time jiu-jitsu technique and whatnot. But I love that you mentioned that, because I honestly didn't even think about that until just now. Like, it is so true. If you compete a lot and you have an A game, like you mentioned, then why would you not want to just always do your A game?
Yeah.
You're like, I'm not going to risk it for a biscuit. You know what I'm saying? Like, in in the middle of class or something like that. And it's, at the end of the day, it is only, like you mentioned, a $5 medal and a T-shirt. But I think the jujitsu community holds competing at such a high standard. It's kind of like on a pedestal. Like, if you do good in competition, that means you are a good practitioner. And so if you take the risks in the mat, or on the mats, or in the training room, and then you can kind of be like, people can be like, oh man, well, how does he always win? I just tapped him in class. And
Yep.
there can be this whole dichotomy inside your own head of like, how am I supposed to win this weekend when I just got my butt kicked in class because I'm trying something new? Did you ever come across that? Or because you step with your A game the whole time, you never have to worry about that?
Yeah, I mean, all the time. I get murked. I get murked in class by guys who I'm like, I know that I'm better at or whatever, because I'm like, oh, he decided to pass on my left side. Damn. Nobody ever passes on my left side. You know what I mean?
That's
Like,
my non-jujitsu side, bro. Don't do it.
if I could just turn left, and it's and so like stuff like that would happen all the time, to some level. I learned, thankfully, to really start focusing on other parts of my game, because that's really important. And it continues to evolve. It's particularly like, I think, the deeper you get, right? Like, there are two different types of black belts. There are black belts that are really fucking good at two things, and they every path leads to those two things, and they set up all of their jujitsu so that, hey, we're going to do this or we're going to do this, and either way you're going to fucking lose, right?
Yeah.
Or there are black belts that are like, hey, anywhere we go, I'm going to win. And so, like, they're open to taking you where it goes. They're open to getting past. That's okay. Like, I'm not worried about getting past, because I know what happens once I get here. I've been passed a million times. I've been passed more times than you've even tried to pass somebody. And so, like, they so anyways, there's just two different styles, I think, of learning jujitsu, and of getting really, really good at jujitsu, right? Like the famous Bruce Lee saying, "I don't fear a man who knows 1,000 kicks, or who's done 1,000 kicks. I fear a man who's done one kick 1,000 times."
Yeah, and in jiu-jitsu, that definitely resonates quite a bit too, or with any martial art, really. And that's one thing that I always fear is when I'm rolling. I kind of feel like I'm always going to what works for me as a bigger guy. I'm 5'8", 210 pounds, and pretty solid. And so I'm like, all right, well, I can
Travis,
just.
I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to mention one thing.
Yes, sir. Go right ahead.
Like, we commend little guys who are flexible. We commend long guys who are lanky, right? And we make big guys feel shitty,
Yeah.
right? Your size is an attribute,
Yeah.
right? If you were a small, flexible guy, I would never say, "Hey, man, could you lay off on the flexibility?"
Yeah.
If you were a long, lanky guy, I'd be like, I would ever say, "Hey, cut it out with the triangles and the arm bars," right? Right?
Yeah.
But with a big guy, everybody's like, "Oh, bro, he used his natural attributes to play the game that is supposed to favor your natural attributes."
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just such a weird thing that we do in the sport. Like, again, like, if you're crushing 115-pound like female like white belt, yeah, then you're a dick. But like, if you're rolling with somebody and like you're like, "Hey, I'm passing and I use my size to help pass," or like, "I make it uncomfortable for you to be on top of me because it's easier for me to get on my side." Like, those are, I think, you gotta respect the fact that those are your attributes. But anyways, sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. And I think when I first started jiu-jitsu, I gained a little bit of weight since, I started jiu-jitsu 2018. And then, COVID happened. I put on some weight, haven't really dropped it yet because it's not a priority to me. I'm still very athletic and whatnot. But even when I first started, it kind of sucked because I was coming out of like the strongest I've ever been. I was like a competitive CrossFitter. Well, not competitive. I competed in CrossFitting. I competed in weightlifting. And so I was like super strong. I was like 175 pounds. I could squat like almost 400 pounds. I could like front squat, 345 pounds and clean and jerk all this weight and whatnot. So, but when it came to jiu-jitsu, two things happened. I realized that strength didn't matter until I started getting more familiar with jiu-jitsu, and then I was able to apply my strength during technique. But I always got told like, you're using too much strength. You're using too much strength, and you're going too hard or something like that. And at first, it honestly really did get to me because like, man, people keep saying that. And then, it kind of was like, well, how do I stop it? You know what I mean? And I listened to another group of black belts, and they were talking about how when it comes to saying you're going too hard, you're using too much strength, a lot of times it's just a lack of communication in what they're actually trying to say. And it's to your point. This is all to bring it back around to your point. Your strength is a skill. To get strong is a skill. If strength wasn't a skill or a part of your skill, then it wouldn't matter. But at the highest level, or when skill matches skill, strength is going to come out ahead.
Right.
And so most of the time when people are saying, "Hey, don't you use too much strength," it's more of a place of you're kind of being unsafe with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like it's bad that you're using strength, but you're kind of being unsafe with it to your partner or yourself. And I don't think that gets talked about enough. I think a lot of people want to complain about size, but it's because they don't know how to handle it, or they feel like it's just such a dominating force when it comes to the game that they're like, I just don't like. It was more of a crank, bro. You know what I mean? I feel like it's kind of like one of those. It's more of a crank. When you deal,
which is like, again, like, and you make a great point, and I think that like the idea is that you can be strong anywhere. Like, you came here to learn how to do jiu-jitsu. And so like, that's the thing that I tell people, right? Like, that was the same lesson that I learned in like, hey dude, we can beat the shit out of each other in the garage. Like, I came here to learn how to do this martial art. Like,
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with strength, right? Like, you're like, hey bro, like when your strength is limiting your ability to actually learn and apply the technique and also like respond to like, the other thing that I tell people, particularly when rolling with smaller students, is that like, hey, you're wasting both people's time. Like, if you're just using strength against that smaller person, like, you're both you're a not learning, because that person's probably way more technically sound because they have to be, right? Because they have developed a jujitsu that works for a small person, which is really technical. And you can, as a bigger person, when rolling with them, it's a huge opportunity for you to start to really test your technique instead of just trying to muscle your way through everything, because they're probably going to be able to teach you a lot just by taking bringing your strength down and trying to match their level of technical ability.
Yeah, and that's where coming in. That's where like being a good partner, and when you're drilling with someone or rolling with someone on the mats is such a key thing. No one wants to roll with that person that is, doesn't let someone work if they're a little bit of a lower belt. And I'm not saying like let them always tap you or something like that, but at the end of the day, people want to come to jiu-jitsu to try jiu-jitsu and to do their jiu-jitsu. And if you roll with someone and they're just always smashing you and they're just like, well, why am I going to roll with that person anymore? Like, it's just not even fun to me. Like, it's like, but there's good and bad there. When you roll with lower belts, how do you handle that?
It depends. I mean, I'm not like a phenom. Like, I think I'm a pretty good brown belt, but like, and like, I'm a competitor. Like, I'm on the podium every time I compete. So like let that be the judge. Let my actions be the judge of like my skill. So like I said, I don't know how good I am, but when I roll with lower belts, I mean, it depends on who I roll with. I take every opportunity. I had a guy who's a white belt on Thursday, who had been training like 2 months. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like I say, hey, whatever his name is, call him John. Hey, John, what are you working on today? And John says, I don't know. And I say, okay, cool. What do you know how to do? And he's like, I don't know. I'm like, okay, cool. What do you know how to do from the top in this position? I know this pass. Okay, cool. Let's do that pass. And then I give him 20% resistance, and we work around and I let him hit the pass clean once. And I'm like, cool, let's do it again. And then I give him a little bit of resistance, and then I sweep his ass. And then you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I let him feel that, like, and so what happens to me is I have an opportunity to relearn whatever that pass is, because I'm seeing what John's doing wrong. Right. And so I'm not wasting the role. I'm getting all this technical knowledge by being able to explain. He who teaches learns twice.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And at the same time, he's getting something out of it. And, I'll give you an example of how this plays out on a bigger scale. I was doing this with a guy every Sunday morning. Every Sunday morning, we used to have this, every Sunday afternoon, we had this open mat. And we called it an interval class because it's the kind of an intense class, almost like a comp style open mat. And the first round, I would pull the same white belt. This guy, Gus. Gus is like probably your size, bigger dude. And Gus, what are you working on this week? I don't know. I've been getting stuck in close guard a lot. I'm like, cool. Spend my first 6-minute round with Gus every week. A couple months pass, and I mentioned to Gus, oh yeah, like my wife's pregnant, blah, blah, blah. And he goes, oh, she's pregnant. Where is she going to the doctor? Like, oh, he's got a bunch of kids. I figure he's whatever. And I'm like, oh, we're going to this hospital over here. And he's like, oh, cool. When is she due? And I'm like, oh, we're due February, 2023. And he's like, okay, cool. I'm the head OBGYN at that hospital. When
Wow.
you're on your way to that hospital, send me a text and I will make sure you have everything you need and that you're taken care of. And sure enough, we delivered, and Gus was in our recovery room helping us out and making sure that we got our care got expedited and we got out of the hospital. I'm fucking blowing Gus up right now. But like that. And like, so that's the thing, right? Like, you take the time with the white belt, and like, there is a technical piece that's gonna, you're both gonna benefit. And then there is a broader social piece that is the reason why we keep coming back to jiu-jitsu, right? Which is why that's the magic spooky stuff that, like, why we fucking say os and like, keep going even when our knees are blown out, right? So like that part of the community is like really strong. So anyways, I just like that story in terms of like, that's what I do when I roll with lower belts, because not that I did that in order to get help with the hospital,
Right.
but kindness is reciprocal.
Yeah, I completely agree. You mentioned in there that you used to be, or you compete quite a bit, and when it comes to like fatherhood, having kids, your priorities, whether you like it or not, have to change at least a little bit, right? How did you take, not being a father, being a competitor, now having 2 kids and still wanting to be a competitor, how have you made that transition to making sure both cups are being filled as much as you can?
Yeah. Well, first off, it took 3 years off.
Oh, really?
So yeah. I had my son, and before we had my son, I competed when my wife was 40 weeks pregnant with my first
Wow.
son. Yeah. And then it got bronze. It wasn't, it was sort of worth it, but whatever. uh, had I known it was going to be my last tournament for 3 years, more than 3 years, almost 3.5 years, I would have been like, yeah, I think I would have maybe not tapped to that toe hold, but yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard. And what's great about having kids is that, I think what people who don't have kids, or what I did when I didn't have kids that I dealt with, is this feeling that like you could always be doing more. You're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I could always be doing more. I could be eating a little bit cleaner. I could be sleeping a little bit better. I could be at the gym another day a week. I can be doing my strength training. You got kids, you fucking cannot, bro.
Yeah.
You can do as much as you can, and that's it. And when you show up day of, what you get's what you get. And like, that's it, and like that's a different, you just try and be as good as you can with what you have. And what you find out is that you're pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the weird thing, is that you find out, you're like, oh, wait, maybe all of this other stuff that I was doing was just added stress. Maybe all these incremental gains for my amateur Masters 2 competition was just freaking me out. Because what was so cool about my first comps back as a dad is that I didn't have any of those crazy nights where I woke up in the middle of the night replaying old matches in my head.
Wow.
I didn't have any of those, like, those like that terrible feeling in my gut until I got to the tournament and I'm in the bullpen. Well, nothing you can do now. Just got to fight, like, it's on. And so, like, because I didn't have the mental bandwidth to do that. I got a job. I got, I have these little humans that are relying on me. I have a wife that wants to have a relationship with me. And so in some ways, like, I think having kids made me I say this all the time. The kids are an incredible force function for decision making, because you right now, if you don't have kids, you think there's all this stuff that you're doing in your life that's super important, and you're so busy, and it's like crazy. And once you have kids, oh man, you get so good at that. List gets prioritized very quickly, and what actually needs to get done, what's really important, gets done, and all that other shit isn't important, doesn't get done, right? And so I don't know. That's for me. Like, that's how I did it. I train 4 days a week, get at least 20 rounds in every week, and every time I'm there to work. I'm there to get better. And that's it. I do my fucking warm ups. I like, like I talk about the things that I learned. Somebody taps me, I ask them, how did you tap me? There's something I need to learn. I need to pick up. I pay attention to the technique that's being taught in class. I do a round of stand up every time. It's like that hour and a half you have a training, that hour you have a training. That's all you're going to have. So just make the most of it, and that's it. Like, that's it.
What's up, everyone? Summer is upon us, and with hot summer nights comes sleepless nights tossing and turning. That's why you need Mummy Pillow. With Mummy's 6-chamber design and breathable mesh, no longer do you have to worry about that sweaty head getting stuck against your pillow, waking up, tossing and turning, trying to find a cool spot to refresh you enough to go back to sleep. Mummy Pillow has been phenomenal for my night sleeps, and I cannot say enough good things about it. I go to sleep easier, I sleep more soundly, and I wake up with no neck pain. With Mummy's now patented 6-chamber design, you never have to worry about your pillow's fluff going anywhere besides where it needs to. I literally put my head in one section and it stays there the entire time, and it feels great. I absolutely love my Mummy Pillow. I am so thankful that they reached out and gave me an opportunity to support the brand and support the podcast. If you guys haven't tried Mummy Pillow yet, I promise you're missing out. Their products are great. Be sure to go to mvmisleep.com and use code elbowstight at checkout for 15% off and free shipping. Once again, that's mvmisleep.com and use code elbowstight at checkout. And also, you have 30 days free return. So if it doesn't work out for you, then that's okay. You can send it back. No harm, no foul, and no risks. Thank you, Mummy, for sponsoring this episode. Yeah, I think that's one thing that made me, or I need to do better about, is I can only really train 2 times a week, mainly because, my wife and I both like fitness. She likes going to the gym, 3 kids. My oldest son has football, right? So I just have all these different hats I have to wear. And
Yeah.
so training 2 times a week, I definitely my biggest fault right now is not being intentional enough with my training time.
Yeah.
And I recognize that, but it's like really hard um to ramp up training more when I'm there, when I'm like, in my back of my head, I'm always like, all right, I gotta hurry up and get home. I gotta hurry up and get home. You know what I mean? Like I want to stay longer. I want to do more, but I know at the end of the day, like I have other priorities. I
Yep.
often talk about how, each hat that you wear in your life is going to have a different, tier list, right? My first things, I'm a father, I'm a husband, podcaster, YouTuber, whatever. And then, my last one is I'm a jiu-jitsu practitioner, right? And so I have to treat my priorities in that sense. Back when I first started jiu-jitsu, practitioner was like definitely way more up there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now like they've all shifted around, and it's sometimes I feel like I'm cheating myself on the mats. And
Yeah.
it's hard to um not take it personally with myself. You know what I mean? Like it's like one of those like
Yeah.
internal struggles where I get my butt kicked on the mat and I'm like, man, I need to train more. I need to be more intentional when I'm here. And then when I'm there, I'm like kind of gun shy because I know I'm gonna get my butt kicked because I'm not taking it as serious as I am. You know what I mean? Like there's this whole like
Yeah.
back and forth with myself that is such an internal battle.
Yeah. So a few things there. That's actually it's super relatable, and I feel I shouldn't even say that I relate to that while being able to train as much as I do. I have a very generous and supportive partner who lets me go do this, and like we work it out, right? Like babe, I want to be at the gym 7 days a week. How about four? Okay, four is a good reasonable
I
thing.
like it.
I want to train Saturday and Sunday. How about we train one day a weekend? That way the whole weekend isn't completely built around your amateur hobby. Like that's kind of like the the compromise. But again, she's super supportive. The other thing is that there are, and this because I've heard you talk about in other episodes of this podcast. There are ways to get better at jujitsu that aren't just training jujitsu, right?
Yep.
And there's mindset stuff, there's the physical attributes, and there is the knowledge. And of course, like knowledge requires repetitions in order to be practical. But like, I love guys like Jordan teaches jujitsu for
Yeah, it's my
beginners.
boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So his tutorials are from beginners to high level guys. He talks concepts and then he talks like practical stuff. And he is such a good resource, I think, for people. That's like, because you sit down with a Danaher DVD, it's awesome. But
Yeah.
if you have the time to watch a Danaher DVD, even on like 1.5 speed, you could go to class.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a nap. Tell you the truth.
You know, like even like a Gordon Ryan BJJ Fanatics video, right? Like you
Yeah.
could, in the time that you spend doing that, you should go fucking train. Especially most people should just go fucking train because
Yeah.
they're not at the level at which that knowledge transfer is going to make a serious improvement in their game. A guy like Jordan who teaches these like 6-minute like concepts, like, hey, here's the basics of a sweep. You remove a base and you push somebody in that direction. Here are 7 different ways that you can do that. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like it's a very easy to digest thing that you can do while you're giving your kid a bottle, So anyways, that, and then like I like your tier, right? What I learned over the pandemic was that I was, like I said, I was like super, I had just gotten back from Masters Worlds, and I'd lost my second match. Like I was so hungry, dude. And like
Yeah.
I like I said, I competed right. Like I was ramping up, and then the pandemic happened and my gym shut down, and then I had this stretch where I was like, dude, what am I? Like, what am I doing if I'm not actually at the gym doing jujitsu? And I think about jujitsu less like this sport that you show up for and more like something like skateboarding. Like I started skateboarding when I was a kid. I don't skateboard that often now. I mean, I do now more with my kid, but I'm always a skateboarder.
Yeah.
I look at the world through the lens of a skateboarder. I relate to pieces of culture that are skateboarding culture. It's a way of seeing the world. And I think jujitsu is a way of seeing the world once you get into it more than it is an actual martial art. I mean, it is a martial art and there are all these pieces, right? But I know guys who have had their blue belt for 6 years because they can come to the gym for 2 months and then they have to get injured or they work moves them around or whatever it is. Those guys it's a lifestyle. They're practitioners. It's part of who they are. They get to the gym sometimes more than they don't get to the gym. And it's just like, that's just how it is. Sorry, it's like a long-winded.
No, you're good. No, and Jordan, first of all, is one of my really good friends. And I'll be sure to send him this little timestamp so he can, so I was
Awesome.
like, hey, Blake mentioned you.
Yeah, no, dude. His I've sent his Kimura trap video to so many people.
Yeah.
Because I use it. People are like, how did you fucking do that? I'm like, dude, this is so simple. Here, watch this guy. You're gonna do it to me next week.
Have you gotten his theory course?
No,
Dude.
I haven't gone deeper with him. I watch every one of his YouTube videos almost, but I haven't he has like a master's class kind of thing, right?
Yeah, dude. So he put out his own theory course, and dude, I took 6 pages of notes from it, and there was like such simple things in there, like you mentioned. I was just like, why the hell did no one ever tell me this, or why did I never think of this? You know what I mean? And it's like such a simple thing, like, the concept of a sweep, like you mentioned. I feel like jiu-jitsu, a lot nowadays, people want to have this like false intelligence when it comes to jiu-jitsu. They want to use big words and the Japanese words, and it's like, dude, you're like overcomplicating this a lot. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's so refreshing seeing people that break it down into the points where it's like so consumable. You know what I mean? Like, you're like, because we're already having to learn so much. A white belt at the beginning of their journey, I mention this a lot. When you first start, when people ask, do you have any questions about this technique? You don't even have a base of information to understand what they're going over. So it's going to be nearly impossible for you to formulate a question that is going to, even help you. There's that whole like growing period where you need to understand the fundamentals, and you need to understand how your body moves in relations to another person that's giving you, feedback. And I feel like, in jiu-jitsu nowadays, a lot of people want to have this, like I mentioned, like they want to seem smarter about jiu-jitsu than they are, or that it needs to be. You know what I mean? Like, how much like jiu-jitsu content do you consume outside of like actually the mats?
Very little.
Yeah, same.
It used to be a lot more. I just don't have the time bandwidth. Hopefully you're not affiliated with them anyway. I canceled my Flow membership probably 6 months ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, there was very little that I was like, God, how much are you actually using this a month?
Yeah.
I was mostly using it to watch my friends' matches when they were competing at IBJJF tournaments, honestly. That said, like, I also am able to train a lot. So I do the thing that still happens every once in a while where, I'll get caught or something weird will happen and I'll be like, why didn't that work? And then I'll go down the rabbit hole, and be like, oh, okay, there's this, and this. That's why that didn't work. Okay, cool. But, I pretty much, I've dedicated so much of my life to this thing that like, I just have so much other shit to do that I just don't, I don't.
Yeah. So how do you improve outside of when you say, you just can't make it to the mats? What do you typically do to improve? Like, what are your resources?
Yeah. So, like I said, one, if you're a lower belt, like I definitely think there's a level, right? So you're right with a white belt. With a white belt, it's a whole you don't know what you don't know thing, right? Yeah. Like I know what I don't know, and like why shit isn't working, right? So I can go look for the knowledge, but like a white belt doesn't even know why they don't know or whatever. I ask somebody, how do you pass, and they're like, I don't know what a guard is, or I don't know, like aren't I already passing? Whatever. Anyways. So and there's like the physical attributes, right? So there's the style of training. I am like super blessed to have spent years and years on a bike and built a really, really solid athletic base, or at least in a cardiovascular base that helps a lot. And so there's always like 20 minutes. Any adult can find 20 minutes throughout the day to move their body with purpose. And so that's going to help. A huge fan of yoga for BJJ. even if it's like, if you're working too hard, or if you've already done your strength training, or if all you have is like 20 minutes, we get mixed up in our society where the best strength coaches I have, like guys who have PhDs in human performance, have told me when I'm like, hey man, I only have 20 minutes. What do I do? And they're like, mobility. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, like obesity. Yeah. Okay, cool. Like, you want to try and get in some kind of caloric deficit. You want to gain strength, whatever. None of that stuff means anything if you can't move your body through the appropriate range of motion that you're going to need for the rest of your life. Right? Like, floss your teeth. It's like the same thing. Like it's
two things I'm very bad at.
I was terrible at it. I was terrible at it too. I'll tell you, I didn't go to a dentist for 10 years because I was so freaked out. And I went to the dentist and they were like, and it was horrible. And they were like, it wasn't horrible. They were really sweet people. They were very kind to me. And every day since then, I have flossed my teeth. Like I'm like so militant about it now. So, cause I'm like, yeah, anyways, but yeah. So it's like, yeah. Anyways. So there's that. Like most people, like their problems are their mind is thinking their body can move in a way that their body doesn't know how to move in yet. And so putting those things together, moving your body with purpose is super important. And I'm not saying like, just go in the garage and do a bunch of shrimps, like, which is like, which I've done a lot.
Yeah.
But,
I do it in bed when I'm like switching sides. I just like switch my hips, Yeah.
That's how that's how I knew I was a practitioner. My old coach, when he gave me my purple belt, he said, you used to be a bike racer who did jiu-jitsu, and now you're a jiu-jitsu practitioner who rides a bike. And I knew it changed when the way I got out of bed was like, I was shrimping out of bed. You know what I mean? So that's one way. And then particularly for competition, I'm a huge proponent of having a strategy. So I think a lot of guys go into a tournament and they say, oh, we'll just see what happens when we hit the ground. Like, I'm going to get him to my game and then we'll, I'll submit him, or like, I'll do this and do this, I'll do this, or maybe I'll do this, or maybe I'll do that. And it's like the way competition works is particularly at a lower level is that like two guys spend like 90% of the time doing something that they have 10% experience doing, which is stand up. Is that guys who have spent 90% of their time on the ground suddenly think they're a freaking black belt judoka and can like, hip throw somebody, or they're too scared. They're waiting for the other guy to do the thing and they just fucking yank on each other and they like take the worst shots you've ever seen, shots that they're embarrassed that they've taken, right? And they spend 3 minutes doing this thing that's so silly because they've spent 6 months doing jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Right.
That they hardly get any time to do it. So in my head, whenever I'm telling somebody, whenever I'm coaching somebody who's going to do their first tournament, I say, like, have a game plan in your head and play out the scenario, play out the first 30 seconds of the match over and over and over again. And then when you get to train, when you get to the gym, do that 30 seconds, find a partner and do it over and over and over again. Because it really comes down to a matter of confidence in those first few minutes of the match for most people, right? Nobody wants to stand up. They're both sitting there going like, can this shit get to the ground faster? Like, I know what I'm doing down there. I don't know what I'm doing up here. And like, somebody listening to this would be like, oh, bro, like, don't pull guard. You got to be a wrestler, like all this stuff. And it's like, hey, man, most people, like, this is an old man sport. The biggest tournament in jiu-jitsu, other than ADCC, but actually the biggest by competitor is Masters Worlds.
Yeah.
This is an old man sport, an old man and old woman sport. And we don't have wrestling practice, we don't have the knees, the back, the elbows for years and years of shots that are going to build that muscle memory to make us actually be able to do it. So if you can do it, that's good. And if you have the confidence to do it, and if you drill it over and over and over again, and that's your game plan, then that's your game plan. But if not, like, do a jiu-jitsu that you know how to do. Yeah. Anyways, so yeah, like I think that mental part of like playing out the first 30 seconds of a match, if you're competing, it's so important. That's how I got to where, that's how I was able to win. Like I said,
visualizations, man. People, it's underrated skill in jiu-jitsu. Think about what you want to do and how it's going to play out and where you're going to go. It's funny you mentioned in there the everyone wants to get to the ground. In my second match of my competition, We ended up on the ground. He like swept me. He didn't get the points because we fell off the mats. And when we got centered back up, the ref stood us up. And I looked at him and I was like, bro, I thought we were going back to the ground. He's like, me too. I was like, shit, man, this sucks. So, but when you mentioned cycling, what are some lessons that you've taken from cycling and brought them over to jiu-jitsu, whether it's competitively or not? What are some lessons that have like kind of transferred over?
So a few things, being able to endure just a lot of discomfort is like that. Cycling is just enduring discomfort, and doing it at everybody hurts. Everybody on a bike hurts, and in a race, and so it's just not making your performance contingent upon how bad you hurt. And like that's just like a mentality mindset thing. There's a guy, Hector Beltran, who runs a gym out here. I was on a podcast with him not long ago, and Hector is he's a super competitive black belt. He's winning IBJJF tournaments, Masters 1, Masters 2, I think, and he's winning bike races. He's a mountain biker and a road cyclist, and he got into cycling like after he's been in jiu-jitsu. It's kind of maybe a newer passion for him, and he's like, bro, jiu-jitsu is easy. Jiu-jitsu, you can tap at any time. You could just tap and be done. You can give up.
Over. The ultimate
you can quit.
Escape.
It's done. Cycling, bro, you have to ride all the way home. I'm like, yeah, it fucking sucks. You know, like he's like, you're out there, you're suffering. Everybody's suffering. You want to quit? You can't. Like, there's nowhere to hide. And like I Hector said that. I didn't say that. But so there's that, right? There's like a mindset piece. Also, like one interesting thing about cycling is that everybody has fitness, and fitness is really fickle. So I remember when I got my first stripe on my white belt, and the sense of pride that I had because what it represented. It represented that I had acquired a level of knowledge that no one could take away. In cycling, you spend a whole year, you spend months building your base fitness, your zone 2, zone 3 fitness. And then you spend months building your zone 4 to zone 5 fitness. And then you spend like a few weeks doing your very top of the pyramid. And so you just done like 4 months of training to build fitness that you're going to use for a 2 or 3 month season. And it's going to be gone. And you're going to have to start all over again the next year. And eventually it just doesn't matter. You're just going to be an old guy who doesn't have the time to do all that stuff on the bike. Jiu-jitsu, nobody can take that stripe away from you. You spent 6 months getting that stripe means something. It means a certain amount of knowledge that you have. And every, I think now more so than ever, like a black belt represents a degree of knowledge and depth of understanding in the sport more so than it maybe represents a lethality or a level of danger that it used to, right? And that's fine. Black belts are older, some black belts, and there are degrees of black belts, right? But I think more than anything, it represents a level of knowledge that nobody can take away from you. So that was one thing, is that like cycling is fickle, man. You wreck, you get sick, that's your season. It's gone. You have to build all that fitness over and over again. Jiu-jitsu, you get sick, you get injured, that knowledge doesn't go anywhere.
Today, we're here with a sponsor for your bundle bouncing of joy. No, we're not talking about a baby. We're talking about your baby makers. That's right. Today's show is brought to you by Manscaped. But just like your babies, your delicate little guys have sensitive skin and deserve products that are not only skin safe, but made with safe ingredients. That's where Manscaped's Platinum Package comes in. From razors to shower care, this package goes above and beyond the gold standard for your body hair. So treat your beautiful boys to the world's finest toys at manscaped.com using code ETP20 for 20% off plus free shipping. Inside the Platinum Package, you'll find the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, Ultimate Premium Body Wash, Ultimate Premium 2-in-1 shampoo and conditioner, Ultimate Premium deodorant, Crop Preserver Anti-Chafing Ball Deodorant, Crop Reviver Spray Toner, Anti-Chafing Boxer, and the Shed Travel Bag to hold all your goods while you're traveling. Like I mentioned before, the shampoo, conditioner, the body wash, and the deodorant are my 3 favorite things I've ever received from Manscaped, and the deodorant smells great. It's aluminum free, clear, and it works phenomenally. My wife even mentioned, she's like, man, you don't smell for someone that is using aluminum-free deodorant. It's like, yeah, thanks, babe. That's because of Manscaped. Thank you, Manscaped, for that. The Platinum Package 4.0 covers all bases from head to toe and hair to ball fro. Get 20% off and free shipping with code ETP20 at checkout. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using code ETP20 at checkout, because the gold standard is no longer good enough. Thank you, Manscaped. Yeah, and that first stripe, man, it's such a powerful feeling. You know what I mean? And I don't know what it is about it. It's probably just like you mentioned, the sense of accomplishment, the knowing of like, dude, for this one piece of athletic tape, I've got my ass kicked for 6 months straight. You know what I mean? Like, and here I am, and like it's like a validation. I always tell people, ranks don't really matter, promotions don't necessarily matter, because it doesn't stop you from learning jiu-jitsu. It doesn't stop you from growing as a practitioner, but it is a phenomenal way of your professor to say thank you. You know what I mean? Like, it's just it's a great feeling to me. It's they're showing their appreciation for the work that I'm doing. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a powerful thank you. You're like, dude, hey, you've been crushing it lately. Here's another thank you to you, or here goes the next belt color, or something like that. That's what I see it as. And if I don't get promoted and someone else does, maybe it's just because I'm not putting in as much work as they think I should be. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of like, it's like, well, am I letting them down? Like, what am I doing wrong? How can I improve to get to move to the next level?
Totally. I mean, stripes didn't exist till there was a business model.
Yeah, true.
So, and neither did belts, really, right? So there is a certain mental gymnastics and psychology to how and when you promote people and why you promote people. And a lot of it is reflective of knowledge and power and skill and what you're able to do on the mats. But much of it is your professor having a real human relationship with you and being able to determine, hey, this guy needs a little kick in the ass, or this guy deserves to be recognized for what he's been doing here.
Yeah. And it's great. I love it. I mean, I never thought, like, I used to wrap that athletic tape around my thumbs when I would clean and jerk to like make my hook grip not hurt as bad. Now it's so much more to me.
Yeah.
So, but hey, so when it comes to like your writing, we mentioned at the beginning of the conversation that you tell stories on the internet, and probably your biggest one is This Week in Fatherhood. And it really, I mean, as we're close in age, similar backgrounds and stuff like that. It like resonates so much, and probably resonates to a lot of people at home. What made you want to start doing this like recap of, the ups and downs of being a parent?
It's funny. I actually haven't talked about this at all before. So for the first person asking about this, I was reluctant to do it. It was like, I tell stories, right? And so it was a day that I didn't have like a story to tell. And I was like, well, like, let's just talk about my week. I am a big fan of saying like, hey, I'm a guy who tells stories on the internet one day a week. One of those stories is about being the father of 2 small kids, right? I am not a dadfluencer. I'm not like a guy who's trying to use my status as a father to build a content platform. And so I have a reluctancy to leaning in on that too much, but as it has been the thing that I've done that has impacted people the most, and I have to respect that. So yeah, it was like, again, the idea came to me is I had this day where I was like, oh, I don't really have a story to tell, but I'm thinking about this last week I had. And so let me just do a quick recap of my week. And it just really resonated with people. And so many people were like just begging me to do it again the next week. And so I did it the next week, and that just went crazy. And then I did it the next week, and like that went crazy. And I was like, well, and like by crazy, I mean, there are certain things like stats, like, oh, like views and virality and all of that shit. Right. But there's the other side, which is like the DMs and the emails and the comments that are like, holy shit. Like, I have a responsibility now. Like you have like, that's the thing people don't really talk about when you get a platform, is like, you're a normal ass dude. Like, I'm a normal guy. And suddenly there are 150,000 people who saw something I made and said, I want to see something else that guy made. Right. Like, that's what a
Yeah.
follower is, really. And you're like, oh shit, maybe I should make something else. Like, okay. And then there's the level of, like, when you're talking about the things that I talk about, which are a little bit more emotional, maybe a little bit more triggering, there's a certain respect and reverence you have for that. And so when somebody, I don't have time or the bandwidth to reach out to everybody who reaches out to me. And so my way of responding is just saying, like, hey, I'm going to show up next week and do it again, and that's my way of showing you that you were heard. And that, like this, it's interesting we're talking about this today, because like this week, the one that I just put out was the hardest one I've ever had to put out, just because I was going through a lot that week, just as a parent and emotionally. And it was like the first time I've ever felt like I don't want to do this right now, because there was a certain part of it that just didn't feel appropriate or worthwhile to share with people. And of course, when you share something like that, you realize, oh, this is the thing that you really need to share with people.
Yeah, one thing that you mentioned in one of your This Weeks in Fatherhood, and you kind of alluded to it too, is like the emotional side of you as a parent, you as a person, and then teaching your children to be okay with that as well. As us growing up, I'm sure it was probably with you too. Like my dad never really talked to me about emotions or how to handle certain things in my life. And so now as a father, I've realized, and being like an emo kid, hardcore kid, right? Like a little bit more emotional growing up. But now that I've realized, like, there's this whole stigma behind like gentle parenting. And I kind of hate the word of like gentle parenting, because I'm not a gentle parent. I think I'm a more conscious parent. You know what I mean? I've learned that through my background, also being raised and whatnot. And I'm not knocking my dad. My dad was a phenomenal person. My parents were great, right? But you can learn from other people and from, now we have new data and stuff. I don't necessarily believe in like gentle parenting. I believe in giving my son a way to express himself and to be okay with crying or being okay with these tough emotions that we go through, and not belittling him for being upset because I took the tablet away, or not being upset because I said he couldn't have um, a popsicle or something like that. Like, those are real feelings, and as a parent, I shouldn't be looking down on him, because that kind of led to where I was at his age, or as a teenager, of not wanting to open up about certain things, and having struggles still as an adult when it comes to my emotions, and being open with people. So as a parent, how do you handle that as well? And I mean, you're very open about it too, but like, what are some ways that you kind of approach being okay with being emotional, and then passing it on to your son to it's okay, it's not you shouldn't be ashamed of your emotions.
Yeah, I mean, so in some ways, it's a lot harder for you than it is for me, right? You have a 14-year-old who's like, I mean, they're basically a human. They're
Yeah.
basically a fully formed person, and the just the levels of communication are so different. I have like a 3.5-year-old who's basically like a hand grenade, like a walking human hand grenade,
So
right? So
true.
like, and so like when I'm saying like, hey, like, let's talk about our emotions, I'm saying like, hey man, like, you can't punch your brother in the face. Like, that's weird. He's an infant. Like, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
that's
I'm
like,
right there with you, bro.
like, so, and so it's a little bit like, but I am trying to set a model with my behavior, and I'm trying to set a model with my approach. We have, it's not like, here's the deal. We want what's best for our kids. We want our kids to be better than who we are, right? That's the goal. And in our generation, there is an epidemic of suicide, and men have just just a dramatically higher suicide rate than women. And there's a reason for that. And if you're like, hey son, I know that you as a boy are and I guess dads of women as well, or of girls rather as well, but you're like, hey, I know that like you're like 30% more likely to get your hand cut off by a saw. You'd be like, oh man, we need to work on how to handle a saw. We need to work on how to, appropriately put on and take off that safety, and when to keep it plugged in and when to be mindful of those things. Right. You just would. And if you just look at the raw data around like men's mental health, and just like the people, as a grown ass adult, like that struggle in the real world, like the people that who have just problems with addiction as a result of the fact that like that's the only lever that they have to pull, because they don't have the capacity to deal with the emotions that they have. Like all of those pieces you put together and you're like, man, well, we can nip this in the bud now. I could teach my son how to use a saw now. And so it's like the similar concept.
Yeah,
and it's just fucking easier, dude. Like you feel better about yourself, and like to have that level of a relationship, right? Like, dude, don't get me wrong, like we blow up, like we struggle, we have hard days as well, and like you recognize that, like, one, if you blow up or if you have an emotionally intelligent conversation around some of this stuff, the result's usually the same. Like the mess in the kitchen gets cleaned up either way. It's just one version of it. It's a lot more shitty for everybody involved, So I don't know.
Yeah, that's one thing. Like when it comes to my oldest son, is I was like watching, because we were teenage boys, right? And so I was like, man, how the hell did my parents do it? How do I connect with this guy to show him like, these things should be important to him. He should take these things more seriously. And I did some research, read some books, and a lot of times they're like, look, as a teenager, they're pretty much their own person. So they're not going to listen to you as much as you want them to. They don't want to hear your advice. They don't want to hear what you should be doing. Like, they're going to make the decision whether they want to or not. And so recently I kind of was just like, all right, well, I'm just going to tell him like, hey, this is what's going to happen. If you do this, it's your choice. Just know, like it's good and bad. You know what I mean? Like, I try to just give him like the rope to to do it himself, and then whatever happens. And I'm like, look, I'm here. I told you, like this is what happened, but we can learn from this, and kind of taking it more of that approach, instead of always being like, I was in the Navy, and so that militant side comes out sometimes, and I'm like, I got to stop doing that. And one thing that's really helped out too is Jiu-Jitsu. We do Jiu-Jitsu together. He hasn't played it or hasn't done Jiu-Jitsu in a couple months because he's been playing football, but Jiu-Jitsu kind of gives both of us that connection, and then also gives us time when we can be on the mats and kind of take out, whatever frustrations we're having with each other, or emotions that, are kind of unanswered, and have a real connection. Not that we beat each other up, but you know what I mean? Like, there's this whole side to a jiu-jitsu where it's kind of like it's therapeutic. You know what I mean? Like it's humbling. Yeah, you know what I mean? And it's great. I love it. I mean, it's definitely helped. I'm trying to get my wife into it. She's downstairs right now. Babe, come do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
So, do you plan on getting your kids into jiu-jitsu?
So my little guy, my 3.5-year-old, we do a little bit. We probably are in the garage at least once a day, just doing stuff that's like jiu-jitsu-esque. I don't put a ton of pressure on him. I don't want him to think that the only way he can like emotionally connect with me is through the hobby that I enjoy.
Yeah.
But I would, if he's into it, I think as parents, and particularly as like jiu-jitsu practitioners, you're like, hey dude, like there's just a certain competence you need to have around your own body, that like, so that you feel comfortable in any situation, right? That jiu-jitsu kind of provides you around self-defense. So there's certain stuff where it's like, hey man, like I want you to know what happens and how to deal with somebody who's punching you, chasing you, all that kind of shit. That's just like basic self-defense stuff. And outside of that, like I don't have any expectations around like what both my kids want to do. And I don't want to put them in a position where they feel like they have to do it to get along with me.
Yeah, you're like, this is my hobby. If you don't want to do it, that's perfect. I'm still going to go do it, bro. If you want to join me, come on down.
I mean, right now, honestly, like right now, my kid is just like chomping at the bit to come. He really is excited about it. And so I'm trying to respect that while not like, you know, abuse the privilege.
So how do you um we be going for a little bit now. I want to be respectful of time. I just got a couple more questions for you. Um,
Sure.
how do you handle like not overthinking your writing, your parenting, your content creation, and being okay with your like pressing the publish or pressing the post, or you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
how do you handle all that?
Yeah. So some things with content, it's largely deadline driven, right? So I've given myself a deadline and it is as good as it is at the time that I need to put it out. And you just put it out, just ship it, right? I don't know if you've ever, you're about my age. So I was really into vlogging around like Casey Neistat, right? And like Casey was like that. Like he just had a daily deadline. And as good as it gets at the deadline, that's your God, and you obey that, and then the instant you hit publish, you start working on the next thing,
Yeah.
and you don't sit there and think about like, oh man, I could have done that 70%, but just apply that to whatever the next thing is. So deadlines are really important. Also, like just like jujitsu, you you're the way you get better at anything is to keep doing it over and over again, and learning little pieces about it, right? And understanding why it didn't work or whatever. And so you have to get the reps in. And so with all that stuff, it's just reps. If I put something up today and nobody likes it, that's okay. I'm putting something up tomorrow. It's almost it relieves the pressure,
Yeah.
to help you think about it less, for sure. Um, yeah, I would say deadlines, man.
Yeah, those
And
they're
like,
great.
yeah. And like with your kids too, like they're gonna, they're like this, like I said, like my kid is a hand grenade. And so he's going to force me into whatever decision I need to make with him way before I would be comfortable making it. And you just have to trust that whatever that decision is, you're able to deal with the repercussions of what comes out of it as a person. And most people are.
Yeah, as a parent, you know, it's kind of like what you're like. You can't back down from what you said. You know what I mean? Like, because then it shows like you're like not weakness, but uncertainty. You know, you want to be that rock.
Yeah.
Like when I tell my son, like, hey, we're leaving, or we're doing this at this time, or you need to do this. It's like it it doesn't help either one of us if I back down from it and I'm like, never mind. I don't want to build that second guessing in either one of our minds. It's like on the mats
Yeah.
too. You feel you're like, I'm gonna go for this sweep, and then you go for there and you feel like a little bit of resistance, and you're like, should I keep pushing? It's like, no, dude, you commit, like you're already there. Just finish it. If it doesn't work, then just go back to the next thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So hey, so I like to end every episode with the same question. If you could give one piece of advice to a brand new white belt just starting jiu-jitsu, what would it be?
So this is so lame. But give yourself 6 months, 3 days a week. Like that's it. So it's so simple, but it's like the beauty and the curse of jujitsu is that progress takes so long that you are unable to see it happening. You're unable to experience it week to week, day to day, class to class. And so it requires that you can commit to yourself in a way that's like you've probably never committed to yourself before. And like I don't think I think if you try to tell anybody, hey, I need you to do, you've never done this before, I need you to do it 3 times a week for 6 months and tell me you're going to do it now, they'd be like, go fuck yourself. Right? Like
Yeah.
what? No, but like that is the, in my opinion, that is the appropriate amount of time and commitment that you need to give to understand if you're actually going to like it or not. Yeah, and the other thing that I say, so that's your responsibility. That's it. All of the other stuff, that's the responsibility of your academy. So understanding the technique, understanding what you should be thinking about at what time, or what your progress looks like, or who you should be sparring with. You don't have to worry about any of that. All you have to worry about is showing up 3 times a week for 6 months. And if you go to a good academy, they should be handling all of those other decisions. Your only job is to show up on the mat. And at the end of those 6 months, like, you should be at a place because they did all of the other stuff. Like, that's my opinion. So that's like super boring, but that's what I think, is my best advice. Don't, the obvious shit, like, don't think you have to know everything, because you don't. You're never going to know everything. Like, I would say, slow down, all that stuff. But yeah.
No, like we mentioned earlier, like, jiu-jitsu is not super complicated. You don't have to make it super complicated. You show up and you get better or you don't. It's like,
Yeah.
and that first 6 months is definitely something, is a huge milestone for a lot of people.
Yeah, and I think just like historically, right, there's been like a mystique around, like, what, like, oh, there's some kind of magic, like there's some kind of thing that happens, and it's like, nah, this guy's been coming longer than you have. That's it.
Yeah.
Like the line, that I think about is like, I remember when I saw like my first belt promotion, right? And I watched the first guy get his black belt that I've ever seen get a black belt. And I thought to myself, wow, so in 10 years, that guy standing up front still going to be handing out black belts. And that guy who has a black belt is going to be standing behind him. And someone's going to have to stand in front of him and get a black belt tied on him. That could be me if I keep coming here. And that's it. That, like, literally, that's it. Chris, oh God, what's his name? He says it. He's like, you could be anything in 10 years. Why not be a black belt?
Mm.
Yeah,
so, absolutely. Hey, well, if people want to follow you and check out your stuff, your Substack and all that stuff, where can people follow you if they want to see your content?
Everything is Blake of Today. Blake of Today. Like youth of today, Blake of Today. At Blake of Today, you can find me everywhere.
Perfect. Well, Blake, I just want to say thank you so much, man, for coming on the show today. Thank you for your time. This was a phenomenal conversation. I had a blast with you, and I definitely think there's going to be a large group of the audience that gain a lot of knowledge and insight into their day-to-day lives with this conversation, man. So I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Travis, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm sorry I'm so long-winded.
Hey, it's easier it makes it easier for me when you talk more. So
yeah, and I really appreciate if you've made it to whatever an hour and 9 minutes into this podcast. I salute you. God bless.
You made it to the deep end. Let us know. Let us know if you made it this far. So, hey, but thank you guys so much for listening and watching at home. Remember, go follow Blake everywhere. Go check out his content. I promise you, it won't disappoint. And remember, no oil checks here. Peace.